Welcome, everybody. We are very prompt and we're excited to host this community call about Red Pine Scale here on Zoom. My name is Kara Fiz-Hennessy. I'm the Director of Parks and Recreation here at the City of Keene, and we are joined by state, county, and extension forestry professionals. I'd like to introduce each of them before we get into the agenda for this evening. Dode Gladders. Dode, if you could just wave, that would be awesome. There's Dode. He is a county forester with UNH Cooperative Extension, working in both Sullivan and Cheshire counties right now. Liz McKinley, give a wave. Liz is the community forester for the Division of Forests and Lands. In this position, she works with Tree City USA communities, natural resource steward volunteers, municipal staff, students, and the general public to educate and strengthen New Hampshire's urban and community forestry program. Liz graduated from UNH with a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Sciences, Hydrology, and is an International Society of Arboriculture, ISA, certified arborist, tree risk assessment qualified, and a 2021 Municipal Forestry Institute graduate. We also have Ryan Crandall on our panel today. Ryan, if you could give a wave, thank you. Ryan is a forest health specialist with the New Hampshire Division of Forests and Lands, focusing on the detection and management of invasive forest insects. Ryan has an extensive background working with invasive insects, and his goal is to use research-based management practices to protect and preserve our native tree species and the health of our forests. Ryan holds undergraduate degrees in biological science and forest health and a Master of Science degree in environmental conservation from UMass Amherst. We have Joe Rusovich. Joe, give a wave. Joe is the New Hampshire Urban Forestry and Ecology Field Specialist. She works with volunteers and communities to enhance, maintain, and conserve tree canopies in urban areas throughout New Hampshire. She provides technical assistance for outreach, citizen science, stewardship, and tree planting wherever people are concentrated, including city parks, street trees, schools, and town forests. Joe received her Bachelor of Science in Horticulture from the Pennsylvania State University and earned a Master's of Business Administration and Marketing from LaSalle University in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And last but not least, we have Stephen Roberge. Steve is the University of New Hampshire Cooperative Extension State Extension Forester. In this role, he oversees the system of county extension foresters, coordinates outreach to forest owners and professionals, and implements the state's forest stewardship program. Steve and his team provide stewardship options for forest owners to help manage the state's private forest land. Steve earned a Bachelor of Science in Forest Science from the University of New Hampshire and a Master's of Forest Science from Yale University. So thank you to all of our panelists for being on board tonight. Regarding tonight's Zoom, the question and answer feature is live and will be monitored throughout our educational presentation. All community questions will be answered at the end of our information sharing. And if we happen to run out of time, we will be sure to log questions and reach out directly with answers. So after all of that housekeeping information, I would like to turn it over to Steve. Steve, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Kara. I'm just happy. Happy to be here. And just looking to kind of facilitate this process with what's going on here. And I think Ryan Crandall would be up next with kind of a presentation, what's going on. And I'm very interested to hear about kind of red pine scale, how it affects the resource that we have. I know that the city of Keene, the surrounding towns have a lot of red pine planted from past conservation efforts. But unfortunately, we do have a new invasive insect showing up in the community in New Hampshire. It's been in the state for a while. It's just taking a very long time to show up in Keene. But now we just have to come in and deal with this insect that's approaching the Keene community and the greater environment. So before we kind of dive into kind of the impacts, maybe Ryan, we can start off with you and kind of go with the uh, excuse me, the biology and kind of the history of that insect that we're dealing with here. So
Yeah, absolutely.
great, thanks, Ryan.
No problem. So I'll get that going. One sec.
Yeah. So we can see your presenter view. I'm not sure if that makes a difference for you.
How's that?
Looks great.
Much better.
Thanks.
Perfect.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Kara, for the introduction. So again, I'm Ryan Crandall. I'm a forest health specialist with the New Hampshire Division of Forest and Lands, Forest Health Bureau, and I'll be talking about the biology and life cycle of red pine scale. So what is red pine scale? So this is an insect that's native to Japan. It's a sap-feeding insect, loves pine trees of all sorts. In its native range, the pine trees that it feeds on have evolved with this insect, so they tolerate that feeding. And there's also insect predators that actually recognize this insect as a food source. And so, on the occasion that a population gets out of control, those insect predators come in and they can knock it back down. And so, in general, in Japan, their pine trees are unaffected. And this is the range of red pine scale in the United States. So unfortunately, this insect was accidentally introduced to the United States, most likely at the New York World Fair in 1939. A lot of folks were bringing in interesting tree species from all over the world. They didn't realize that there could be some negative consequence to doing that. And so it's very likely that these red pine scales hitchhiked um, on pine trees and then made it onto red pine in the New York area. Wasn't until those trees were transported up to Connecticut that folks started to notice that red pine trees were declining and dying at large numbers. So they were seeing scenes like this. So all those brown trees in there, that's a pretty large stand of red pine that are declining and dying from red pine scale. So coming into New Hampshire, we've detected red pine scale in 2012, so it's been here for a little while now. It was first detected in the Concord area and has been slowly spreading out from the Concord area ever since. But it's also in Massachusetts, and so you can see on our southern border we do have some red pine scale kind of encroaching in from Massachusetts as well. They have, of course, they're aware of this pest down there, and they are managing for this pest. But unfortunately, this is just kind of how things are with invasive insects. They tend to move on their own. And so in Keene or in Swansea, we detected red pine scale in 2024. That was at the Market Basket area. So if you shop there, you might have noticed a bunch of those trees are starting to turn red and starting to decline. And then we have detected it in Keene as well this year. So we do know it's in Wheelock Park and in other properties around town that have red pine, unfortunately. And so this insect is really small. It's less than a millimeter long. So how does this thing move around? So primarily, it's being blown from tree to tree on the wind. It can very easily be blown on the wind, pretty large distances. And then it's also a hitchhiker. So if a bird or an animal goes through that canopy that has red pine scale, they can get onto that animal, and then the animal can transport it over to other red pine trees. And then, of course, there's humans. That's how it got here in the first place. We're really good at moving things around that shouldn't be getting moved around. So here's the life cycle of red pine scale, but don't try and memorize it. We're just going to look at two really important facts here. So this insect has 2 generations per year, and each of the females are producing 260 eggs. So this thing can reproduce like crazy. That means that these infestations can build pretty rapidly. And so here are some of the symptoms and signs of red pine scale. So again, if you're looking at red pine trees and you see a lot of these red needles, particularly they kind of start in the lower canopy and start to move their way up. So you'll have a lot of red needles, and on top of the tree, you'll still see some of those green needles. That's a good indication the tree likely has red pine scale. And then if you have a pair of binoculars, or if you clip a branch down, you would see this white wool. So these insects actually produce a kind of wax around their bodies. And if you were to pick at some of the bark flakes, they really like to hide under those bark flakes. Again, they are a sap-feeding insect, so they're trying to get their mouth parts into those branches and actually feed on the sap. So here are 2 red pine trees on the left. This red pine tree, this is a photo I took just a few weeks ago, and so you can actually see a bit of yellowing. That's totally normal. Just like our deciduous trees, like our oaks, our maples, right now they are producing some fall colors, so they're shedding their 3-year-old needles, and you can see that in some of the yellowing. But on the right, we have a tree that's infested with red pine scale, and again, you can see how the needles are a nice red color, they're kind of a bronze, and that is very symptomatic of a red pine scale infestation. And so as these insects are proliferating on red pine and feeding on red pine, they're zapping the tree of their nutrients. And so they leave the trees vulnerable to native insects that typically wouldn't be a problem for a healthy tree that can defend itself. But these guys, um, this little beetle on the right, this is a red turpentine bark beetle. They love these stressed red pine trees. So they'll come in, they'll lay their eggs, and they actually feed just beneath the bark. And that's very damaging for these trees. And so as these trees are declining, these beetles come in and they kind of put that final nail in the coffin and really um, start to speed up that transition from a declining tree to tree mortality. And so this stand photographed here, after they discovered red pine scale in this stand, it was about 5 years until that stand was dead. So it's a really quick. Once you find it, depending on how long it's been there already, you've got about 3 to 5 years before those trees really decline. And so unfortunately, this insect doesn't have a lot of research interest right now for whatever reason. So we don't have some of the management options we typically have for other invasive insects. And so that leaves us really with one management technique, and that is unfortunately to remove the trees. And this is less important if they're all the way in the woods or where no one's involved, but as everyone knows with Wheelock Park and in that area, if you have dying trees, that's a risk to people's safety, to people's lives, and to property. And so you really need to get in there quickly and remove the trees before they decline, before they become an issue to the folks trying to recreate in that park. And so it's a really difficult decision. It's unfortunate that we're dealing with this pest here, but we do give the city of Keene and Carroll a lot of credit for being so proactive and addressing this issue before it's even worse than it could possibly be. So thank you guys for having me, and I'll be around later to answer any questions.
Thanks so much, Ryan. I'll take it from there. As you mentioned, we do have confirmed red pine scale in Wheelock Park, and we also have confirmed red pine scale in Dinsmore Woods. And if you're not familiar with Dinsmore Woods, it is the red pine stand that straddles Maple Avenue, also known as 5 Mile Drive in the history of Keene. And in talking with our forestry professionals, we have determined that Dinsmore Woods is our priority because the tree health has declined much more rapidly than the tree health in Wheelock Park at this time. So what we are planning to do in terms of the City of Keene and Parks and Recreation, because these are both considered park spaces, is we are attacking this in a two-phase process. The first phase is going to be to harvest the red pine in Dinsmore Woods. And our priority in harvesting the red pine along Maple Avenue is to really make sure that we preserve the understory, which is the younger, smaller trees and the vegetation that has already established itself in that same area. Like I said, the red pine scale in Dinsmore Woods is more advanced, and it's providing a heightened safety concern as some of the trees are already dead. We know that that makes it more susceptible to falling or burning in our statewide drought conditions. There are a lot of concerns that we really want to try to get on top of. In terms of timeline, Dinsmore Woods red pine will be harvested in the mid to late winter of 2026. So once we flip the calendar into January, that's when we're going to start working on phase 1. Phase 2 will be really focused on Wheelock Park. We will be hosting community engagement opportunities in the spring and early summer of 2026, knowing that phase 2 will be set for a midwinter harvest in 2027. We know that this is not an opportunity that anyone would really ask for. And in talking with our forestry professionals last night when we were getting ready for tonight's Zoom, we know that the reality that we are faced with is a situation that will allow us to revisit landscapes and sustainable options within our park spaces. So it's really an opportunity for us to be able to shape what the future of Wheelock Park is going to look like. A jumpstart for what can be, we have established a Branch Out for Parks donation account through the City of Keene and Keene Parks and Recreation. This program is specifically designed to help reforest our park spaces sustainably and with careful consideration for native species, long-term canopy health, and community connection. Through contributions, we'll be able to plant and nurture and preserve trees that not only enhance the beauty of our surrounding and our parks, but also strengthen the city's green infrastructure for generations to come. So with that information, I'm going to toss it to Joe. Joe will be able to tell us more about additional opportunities.
Hi, everybody. Are you seeing my slideshow?
Soon. Yes.
All right, so as Kara said, I work for UNH Extension and I manage the Natural Resource Stewards Program. It's a training program that supports a volunteer network of people throughout their communities who love the outdoors and want to make a difference in their communities. At the moment, it's a 12-week interactive hybrid course that brings people together from all over and focuses the learning on trees and plants and the whole system with which we as humans are interconnected. And we focus on how we can help restore areas that have been impacted by things that we do. And the intention is then, with that knowledge in hand and ongoing support from all the specialists that feed into the program, those volunteers then go back to their communities and take care of things and help Parks and Recs and other specialists in the community to deal with ongoing environmental challenges. And so we thought maybe it would be a great idea to introduce this program to Keene. This program got started by a forester named J.B. Cullen, who noticed that the needs of trees in urban spaces are very different from the needs of trees in a native forest or even trees in a managed woodlot sort of situation. And so he worked on this program with the initial intent to train county foresters in this kind of new area of forestry, then train other professionals in the urban forestry kind of genre. And then his bigger goal was to help train community volunteers to kind of help support those professionals. And that community tree stewards program is what has evolved into what we currently call the Natural Resources Stewards Program. So the program has kind of a basic curriculum set up. The 25% is what we call the basics, tree ID, knowing how tree biology works, how trees function, how to look at them and assess their needs and their care. 25% is about communication skills, because our hope is that the volunteers will go out into their communities and spread this information. So we work on those sorts of skills. And then the other half of the program is really about what's going on in the world, whether it's development pressure or pests, diseases, whatever have you. So what that looks like is looking at water, looking at soil, looking at forest communities, how they grow, which is that tree biology and tree health area, and different aspects of conservation biology. That 50% piece of what's going on in Keene, obviously red pine scale is a big challenge for you guys. So we would talk about that. Talk about what happens to all the waste wood if these trees are coming down. That's going to have a big impact on the material resource. Stormwater management will become an issue. Perhaps taking all of those trees out can have an impact. What happens to the forest communities? How can we rehabilitate them? And most importantly, how can we have an active community involvement, because those new trees coming into those spaces are going to need help for a while they establish. And then, as Kara mentioned, you have an opportunity here to really redesign what the landscape aesthetic for Keene is going to be. So we'll talk about that process. We've got a great core team of instructors and then a whole range of guest presenters, from county foresters to state specialists. And all these folks are part of the ongoing support that volunteers get, because you get to meet these folks, learn what their expertise is, and then know that they're a resource for you after you finish the program and go back out into the community to do good work. The 4 questions we have all of our specialists answer when they're providing their expertise is why they love what they do, why it's important and what the science behind it is, how humans have impacted it, and then what the solutions are. The program gets supported by a whole range of state and local and federal organizations. So there's a great resource base there to help people go through the program and follow on with their projects. And the stewards have a big impact around the state, as you can see. It's thousands of hours in lots of communities all around the state. And they do all kinds of great stuff in their communities to help with ecosystems of all different sorts. Where to go next? You can scan this QR code that will take you to the Natural Resource Stewards Program website. And I've just put some other resources there. Ethan Tapper's new book, How to Love a Forest, is a great read. The Arbor Day Foundation's got all kinds of great resources. And as you can see, there's a few other things you can look at to start thinking about urban reforestation and how you include your greenery in a strategic planning way. So at that point, I'll just answer questions if there are any.
There is one question, but I believe it's not for you, Joe.
Okay.
I don't know, Kara, if you want to answer this or if anybody, how do the trees in Ladies Wildwood Park compared to Dismore Woods and Wheelock?
So the red pine trees in Ladies Wildwood Park are part of a more diverse forested area. And we did walk through that park in the late fall of 2024 when we were getting ahead of the red pine scale, visiting Keene and making its home in Keene. So we feel really confident that there are so many other species of trees that even if the red pine in Ladies Wildwood becomes part of the Wheelock Park harvest, it won't have as much of an impact as the harvests at Wheelock Park and at Dinsmore Woods. Thanks, I got a heart.
And then I saw if there aren't any other questions, I know Steve said his PowerPoint works. I think he has some historic photos.
Yeah, sorry about that. My PowerPoint was locked up in the middle or at the beginning of this presentation, but there's some context about kind of like why we're here today. And let me just move this over. There we go. And so, the biggest thing is New England is not, it has really seen hurricanes over the years. We haven't seen a catastrophic hurricane since 1938, which is pretty impressive. And so the 38 hurricane, there's been a lot of kind of documentation on that, and it really paid an impact to Cheshire County. Over 50% of the trees in Cheshire County in 1938 were blown over. That's quite a thing. And so we receive a catastrophic hurricane every 75 to 150 years in Cheshire County in the Keene area. And so we're kind of in that zone now since 1938 where we may see something like that. But in 1938, we did experience a hurricane that really knocked over a lot of our trees. And so this is Ladies Wildwood Park in 1938, and that's what it looked like at the time. There's an extensive salvage operation that happened where all the pine trees were salvaged, were stored in ponds. There's a lot of great stories about that as well. But this is what September 1938 looked like prior to the trees being salvaged and harvested. This is Wheelock Park right here, same tangle, same mess, just across the street. Pretty crazy to think about.
Wow.
And then this is the entrance to Wheelock Park. If you're familiar, if you're in Keene, those square pillars that are there with a wrought iron kind of
Archway. Yep.
Archway. Thank you, Kara.
You're welcome.
It says Wheelock Park on there. You can actually see that archway that's all bent and folded in there. That's there. And so after the 38 hurricane, there's extensive salvaging that was happening. This is again Wheelock Park with horse pulling out lumber or logs to be turned into lumber there. And today we're kind of in the situation that following that extensive salvage operation, it was the decision was made to plant one species, and that one species was red pine. Red pine was not subject to white pine weevil, so that meant it grew nice and straight. And at that time, white pine was still king in terms of lumber and boxwood and what have you. And so the idea was that we would have pine trees in the future that we could use. And the idea was to plant that one species. I think today, most forest health specialists, most foresters will say that planting one species in a large area is not a great idea. And so we want to diversify the species mix that we have here, not only for forest health reasons, but also for aesthetics, for ecology and what have you. And so that's kind of why we're here. That's a historical kind of perspective of kind of how we got to that point. And it really stems to the hurricane of 38 and the idea of planting that one tree species, red pine, both in Dinsmore Pond, Dinsmore Woods, Wheelock Park, and really in a lot of other places across Cheshire County, New Hampshire, and New England. So, great. That's
Thank you
that's
so
all I
much,
have.
Steve.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry about that.
Do we have any other questions from our community, or is there any more information that we could share that would be helpful? I know the importance of wait time. It still feels really long, even though it's not. What we will be doing is we will be posting this recording so that it can be accessible on keenparks.com. Give us about a week, we'll be able to do that, and follow along on our website and sign up for notifications from the city. If you click the box that says Parks and Recreation, a lot of information comes that way too. But follow along for more information as we get ready to unveil the harvesting plans and the community conversations that will happen in the near future. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Dode. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Joe. It's been wonderful seeing all of you, and we really appreciate your support. Have a good night.
You too.